But it's live from Melbourne. So I
think they're a major cut. You can't not have the Rugby World Cup there, can you?
I think they've put it as late as 10 o'clock at night when they kick off over there, their time. But it's still 4:30 in the morning, not really. So. However, we digress.
Okay.
What I was going to say to you is there will be a lot of people that want to write novels or think that they can write novels because what they do is they look at the finished piece of work and think, well, I can do that. Mm-hmm. They don't look at the process that the writer has gone through in order to do that. It's a little bit like, I've seen a Picasso painting, I can do that.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with the end product that you're identifying with rather than the process.
Yeah.
You know, how do you feel about that?
Like just out in the kitchen before we came in to set up, I really love the process, and they did. In fact, my last blog was just about this, mostly about the second draft of the book, which is very, very different from the first draft. Typing it up on the computer, I was saying it's quite melodic. I find working on the keyboard. I don't really sit down to work, so if I pace around a bit and start getting ideas flowing, then it sort of comes in. To exaggerate it a bit, it's a bit like piano, nice melodic bit of piano. Whereas the second draft is like hearing someone tune the piano up. There's not the flow as you're writing a paragraph. You're just reading it, and there might not be anything wrong with that paragraph, and you get to the next one. Oh, I slightly misspelt that word. Dum dum. And so the pattern that you're working, the process is very very different from a first draft. And then when it goes back and forth to the editor, I like getting feedback and the notes there. I think the process is it. Maybe you know better what I mean. It sounds really flippant, because the end product is what people are interested in, and it is the end product that you're presenting to someone, and it seems flippant to be so offhand as to say that much of the process of getting there is just a bit of fun, and it's my opportunity to play around, to create a little sovereign space and have fun with it.
How do you know when it's finished? I mean, there may have been parts that you've omitted that in some point in the future you'll look back and think, well, that was a really good bit. I could have kept that. Because if it's anything like a painting, it goes through various stages. Yeah. And you can look back at certain photographs that you've got and you think, it worked quite well there. Have I overworked it in order to?
Yeah.
Is that the same with writing? Or?
I think it is. It must be similar, because I would use the same terms that you're using there. Yeah. Because that's it.
Apologies.
I'll hold on to that.
Well, that's an unavailable caller, so I'm just going to let it ring.
Okay, great. We can leave that in the edit then.
I've got an answer thing that'll kick in a minute. Sorry, John. Where were we at?
Yes, I just 5 seconds ago I said I'll hold that thought.
Yeah, probably slightly longer than 5 seconds.
I think, well, you were asking me mostly about process and when you make a decision that this is it, this has come together, I can add this to it, but it's going to take away from the overall thing. I can take this out. Yeah, is that, yes, it is that balance. How much are you after? I think it's quite intimate a lot of times, the Meifod Claw, but at the same time it's very deliberately a little larger than life in other places, and it's a little bit of a balance of those things, and possibly because I did want it to read as a comedy, although it's quite strange and goes to some odd places. I found with the writing, it's quite often it's that other ingredient. Writing The Brine in Me at the moment, that's someone's autobiography. It's it's not mundane, but it's everyday life that someone's led and they're looking back on, and you get to have fun with a lot of mundane things. But with the Meifod Claw, it was.
I don't think there's anything quite mundane with any of the characters or their actions in the Meifod Claw.
Yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah. Oh, that's okay, because I felt like a lot of it really hinged. If I can get you to enjoy Herbert, Derek, and Benjamin, I felt like the rest you'll come with me. I'm asking a lot, but you'll come with me if you enjoy the characters. And often it was finding that extra ingredient to make a scenario a bit absurd, or a bit creepy, or a bit with the brine in me, because it's more everyday. You don't require particular extra ingredients, but the Meifod Claw's a bit more exotic, so you look what's an extra psychological problem, what's an extra character that could come in and just spin the whole situation and make it more difficult. So I think probably with that book there was a lot of what's that extra little ingredient.
Right. Well, I mean, rather than sticking purely with the Meifod Claw, I just thought I'd ask you this. It brings us on to some questions here. But just writing in general, and I've just made the sort of connection of, as a painter, I am only ever engaged in the process of painting when stood in front of the canvas. As a writer, you must constantly carry the ideas around with you over long periods of time. How do you organise and manage this?
I've made a few notes here
for
you, if that's alright. Play the scenes out. I still do gardening work, which I love doing. And that work affords me the opportunity to run scenes through, to have a little process. Do I want to go here with them? Do I want to go there with them? And then more often than not, that process, by the time I get to the keyboard, I'll throw away those ideas that I've had. But there seems to be an importance to have gone through it. Try them here and try them there. And sometimes you get to the keyboard, actually that is how I'm gonna play it out. But I enjoy the fuck it, I'm gonna do it this way now. Which is probably a lot of that is that's my freedom.
I'm just thinking, starting and constructing a novel. I don't know how long it took you to start to get into it, and how long it took you to finish it. But what I'm surmising is if I'm comparing that with painting, there's probably 20 or 30 paintings or maybe even more within that period of time. But yours are quite, you've got to keep it coherent. You've got to be able to go back and pick up where you left off the time before. Yeah. And be in the same frame of mind. Yeah,
it is I think part of the art of it, it's holding that tone. I'm quite, perhaps more than other authors, what I really like to extract from writing is a certain tone.
When you were saying that it's part of the process, the keyboard, when you're working at it, that's when you come alive.
Yep.
Between each stages, we'll just say that you can't write for 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
What goes off in your head during those 3 days?
Impatience.
So do you have what branch you can't get back to?
No, it's okay. I look forward to it, and probably some amount of impatience. If you want to get up in the morning, I want to get straight on with it and get into it. But then night time, I find particularly in winter as it's getting darker early, and you're not distracted by things outside. I find longer, darker evenings very, very good, productive for working. So I quite look forward to, say I might not get to work all day, after dinner or something in the evening I might start working then, and I look forward to it. I know sometimes that comes out as impatient.
Reward that you've
earned, or like getting to go to the playground, getting to go back into the sweet shop, and but I think as well, you larger ideas, narrative threads and things that once they sort of click into my mind, I'm quite comfortable that they're in there, and it'll find its way out as the tone as the tone needs it to.
Right.
If I try and control it too much, I fall a little bit out of place with how I do it.
Is there a danger of writing things within your head, and then by the time that you come to type them up, they become old because you've gone through the process of thinking about these, or does that lead you on to the next stage?
Yeah, I really like vitality to writing, and yeah, if I go through something too much, yeah, it will become. If I feel like I've rehearsed it too much, I might feel as though it's coming out stale in how I'm doing it. But the whole, I mean, probably the whole process for me sounds quite offhand. Usually what I'll do is straight away put some music on, if for whatever, with the brine in me that I'm doing at the moment, there's a lot of sea shanties and a lot of folk music. Get the atmosphere going, create something that I want to drag myself into, and then don't worry about it. Super loose, super duper loose. But I think that's probably quite a calibrated process to be offhand and to be as unprepared as you can get away with, in a sense. And so much in life, people aren't prepared for the things that happen.
Are you prepared for the things that happen? Or does it take you on an adventure?
Yeah.
In as much as, you know, I'll just go down this hole, you know, and see where it takes me. Wow, I didn't realise I was going to end up here. Or...
Yeah, and it feels like I'm sure you could give an example where this isn't true, but to some extent, there's no bad scenarios. Just depends how you deploy it. Yeah. And I like finding something of interest in a big scene or in a little scene, and so I never feel, is this the correct scene to roll into? It's more a case of I'm gonna go here. How do I deploy that scene then going in? So it feels like everything's okay and nothing is off limits, but you've got to deploy the tone of that correctly to try ultimately to try and be entertaining for people who are reading it, which probably in the end to some extent that's I'm aware now that you're doing this to go on sale, and much as entertainment is a bit of a dirty word in the arts, I do want the books to be entertaining, and I think that's probably the part of them, so I try and keep in a process that is entertaining for me to do it, to put on some music, have a cup of coffee, be nice and loose, and then almost counter-intuition, don't write. You're almost, your hands are almost forcing your body, going, I've got this bit, well, give it another couple of minutes, and be a bit teasing with yourself, and all that sounds very offhand and very flippant way about going to write a novel.
So are you writing for yourself?
While I'm doing it, definitely.
Yeah. And then if everybody else can share that or touch on that, so then it's a benefit. But you're not writing from a commercial point of view.
No,
because otherwise you'd be involved in sort of publicity and book launches and all the razzmatazz that goes with that, which is.
I'm more aware now with the second novel and having published the first one, I'm more aware of that world now than when I first started the Meifod Claw and there was nothing but me in the manuscript. I am more aware of the larger world, but because I do enjoy my time at the keyboard, it doesn't seem to get in the way. You know, once you come in your study and you close your door, it's a bit of a little magical realm that you set up, and it's the enjoyment of being in that. And probably, like a lot of things like cooking and stuff like that, the more the person loves it, the chances are the better the product will be for people in the end. Yeah. But no, there's always almost a deliberate but not offhand kind of I'm just fucking doing it this way because this is the way that I enjoy it. And
I mean, looking at it, you're saying that your writing is very spontaneous, that it comes alive when you're at the keyboard. Did you have a plan worked out before you started, in as much as this is where the novel's going to be set?
Yeah.
These events are going to take place in some order, if not all of the order, and this is how it's going to end. So I've got the overall plot scheme worked out.
Yeah.
I'm now going to flesh it out and put the...
Yeah, pretty much like that.
Really?
Yeah. The exact ending, I didn't know. I knew I wanted to have this a big car chase and a Poe's fan. Again, that was just personal. That's going in because occasionally you crowbar things in just because you want them. But before that, there were a few base level things that I knew I wanted for it. I wanted it to be upbeat and probably quite positive. I don't know how much of a youth book it is, but I was thinking when I started it, I'm going to do... I'd had a thought, I really like I Capture the Castle.
Right.
And I had a thought to doing a boys version of that, with that sort of isolation and dry, warm characters. That was had a positive message. Hopefully that came through. I know it changed and altered a little bit as it began to grow and as it needed tending to in different ways. And after that, I decided that I would run on the whimsy that I wanted to run on in the book, but that each chapter has to take you further into it, emotionally or narratively. It's got to, with the amount of whimsy that I was allowing the characters to have. They have to work, they're not beset by a lot of day-to-day things. I knew I wanted to keep it punching forward, so I made sure that each chapter move that narrative on. And so although you're going to be hit with a lot of whimsy and fancy, you're always propelling the story forward, and that was a very base rule for me, which makes it sound more linear, as though that's...
Well, at the beginning, or at each chapter, the characters go one step further than they did in the chapter before, which is quite interesting. Yeah. You're saying about pushing the barriers in.
Yeah, no, that was. I'm not sure. Don't know how you find it with the painting, Graham, but I think sometimes you're aware of rules might be too strong, but you're aware of the world that you're creating and what you want it to live in. But beyond that, a bit like driving a car, when I don't consciously think, press the brake pedal. Yeah, you just do it. And I wonder with you in the art, it feels like that to me with the writing. You just sort of semi-automatically doing it, which seems to work. But it's hopeless for giving people answers, because you can't give the specific mechanical answer that people...
Well, it's like the Greek and Roman poets that had the muse, the thing that spoke in their ear and directed, the pen or the brush or whatever. Yeah. And it's not that really, but I know exactly what you mean. It's getting to that stage where you are at one with the thing that you're working on.
Yeah, I think that's what you're trying to do. Yeah. Not for ego, just for the enjoyment, really. I think. Anything else? Any hard rules there? The themes and stuff that I knew that were in there. I roughly knew how I wanted to deploy those, and I knew I wanted an older sort of approach to telling a scene where we wouldn't hold a point of view.
Right.
It's not exclusively by any means, but a more modern approach would be that if I was going to write our scene here between you and I would hold on either one of us and we see the scene through your eyes. But I wanted an older style where I could jump from person to person. Yeah. So it would allow me to take quite a linear scene, like 3 or 4 people around a kitchen table, but then weave a bit more of a complex conversation between them, because I'm firing them around a bit like a pinball. You're smacking into this there, and
So there's a freshness, there's a certain dynamism that one person
that
to what's
vitality that I was after. And early on, I knew that I wanted to do that it would allow me to do things like allow a character to leave a scene and then we just follow on with them for a little while, and we've left that one behind, and I like the flow of that. Try and give you an example. I'm not going to pull one from literature, but Richard Linklater, the director, who Dazed and Confused. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
We sort of follow them over an evening, don't we? And one group of the guys will go up and meet up with another one, and the camera follows on, and we leave that last group behind, and we carry on to. And I enjoyed. I didn't want to particularly reference that, but I enjoyed that type of flow to a scene. You can leave some people away for a little while and almost wonder, well, what are they doing now? But I knew I would open more doors with the book than I was ever thinking that I might close. I wanted a slight air of magic and mystery around it that I knew I wouldn't get round to answering most of it. But if I could present it in a way that engaged you with it, that would be satisfying enough. I think if you can engage with the work, you don't need to have every answer from it almost.
Did you do film studies at uni or? Yeah. So you're obviously very familiar with film, because I mean, what I was going to say is Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. It sort of starts with one character who's the main guy, John Travolta, and then it moves on because he gets shot, and you think, oh, hang on a minute. Standardly, this is the guy that I'd be following through the film.
Yes,
and then it moves on to who's the other guy? The one in Sixth Sense.
Bruce Willis.
That's right.
Yes.
So it moves on to him, and then it moves on to the black guy. It's quite interesting. I found elements of that with your book. You know, that it's about one character, and then it moves on to another, and it's about another, and it's about another. In which case, you then look back and you think, well, the person that I didn't think would be the main character, he's probably the one that you're now writing about in the second novel, because he's the glue that holds everything together.
You would say Derek is the main. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's going to be between him and Herbert, isn't it? But I wanted Derek to bookend.
Right.
I knew Derek would sort of be the heart of the affair, and you have these two in the friendship between Herbert and Benjamin. There's slightly opposing forces on their approach to doing things, and that Derek was somewhere in the middle between the two of them.
But very subtle. Well, not always subtle, but...
Maybe. I think he's a little bit mercurial, Derek, but I think guys can go that. They can go that way. They've lived a long time, and I think he's enjoying it. By that point, Derek's enjoying the opportunity to sit back and watch the younger generation.
Looking at the characters builds us back onto, like question 3, which I put. Were the personalities of the characters identified before you began, or did they evolve through the situations that you placed them in?
Both. Yeah. Initially, before I'd even put pen to paper, I knew that Derek Gainsborough, his attitude was going to come from my Uncle Jim, who built a concrete boat. Done a lot of maritime stuff, but had a certain attitude that I knew, regardless of what I did to Derek, that it was different from my uncle. He would have that broad attitude, and a few people that know me, there was also a friend of mine in Suffolk who had certain attributes, not a huge amount in the end, but a certain amount of attributes that went into Benjamin.
Right.
And to my mind, they're as different as they were launch pads, really, rather than
skeletons. To flesh out.
What would Jim say to that? That's not really my way of doing it. I think it's probably more, these were people that I've known for years and years, and I know the shorthand conversations that we have between ourselves, and I can sort of take from that rather than Jim would say this, and almost trying to be quoting with them. Just have a bit more fun. And so I wanted to have certain contradictions and stuff, and crease people like that, so people don't always act the way you think they're going to act, do they? Especially in close confines. I mean, these guys in the book are quite isolated up in North Wales. They've deliberately put themselves in this situation, so they're around each other a lot. You get the shorthand, and you get a different type of relationship that we get me coming around here today to talk to you now. If I did that all the time, it would be a different type of of relationship that you get. I don't know if that. If that helps.
That does indeed. I put there some wonderful passage of descriptive writing within the novel that are extremely well observed and more than adequately give a feeling of time and place. How did you decide where or when to introduce these within the overall text?
That's a proper question, so I'm going to look at my notes for that one.
Can I just read you this quote?
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, apologies for my writing because I'm a terrible reader, really. March arrived in North Wales with its timely reticence. Threads of spring brooding earlier mornings, sprouts of dandelions and dotted anemones wove their way into the fibres of the landscape. The tenacious windbags of winter persisted, lifting away pieces of the passing season while threatening weeks of spring rain, which soon saw the eaves of the farmhouse and its barn shed their deepest tears. It was to the irrational pattern of these droplets that Derek had found himself an engrossed audience, sitting in his wheelchair and looking out across the courtyard to the barn. That's a really well observed piece of writing. So, looking at things like that, how do you set this up? Where do you decide when to introduce it? Because that's not in every chapter. You know.
Yeah. I think earlier on, near the start of the Meifod Claw, I'm looking to pitch a certain amount of isolation, and it's a book that goes to a lot of different places as it goes on, but I wanted that feeling of distance, and so I wanted to sort of as quickly as possible put you in and build that world around you.
And that's probably the world that someone living on their own in the middle of nowhere would observe. Yeah,
in the position that Derek's in, he's in a wheelchair, he's in a house on his own, he's effectively been abandoned at the start of the book, and that's sort of what he sees. He can't, probably, if you push me on it, a scene like that, I might start thinking that way, because I've seen my uncle in his wheelchair, the limits, and a scene where it draws your attention then, that having never really been interested in gardening, I watched over the last 10 or 15 years a mark take a real interest in the garden, and just watching butterflies around a buddleia or something, and trying to see the world through his eyes. And possibly I'm a bit I might be quite romantic in my approach to
Wordsworthian almost. I don't mean that in a naff sense.
I think I do quite like romance. I quite like beauty. Well, this and I might like to kind of perhaps a bit like I do with her, but I as a character I knock him about a bit from pillar to post throughout and maybe he doesn't have the highest dignity as a character, but I wanted to do that with a certain beauty with him.
I have a couple of friends that are writers. One's quite successful. He's a
bastard.
14 novels published or so. But, you know, my thoughts about his work in a certain way is I often feel that the plot gets in the way of the writing, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah.
Because I need something to, you know, as a light-hearted touch, as a piece of observation that's not necessarily contributing to the plot, but somebody looking over a beach or just talking about the feeling that they get, or whatever. And I found that your novel didn't do that. I felt that there was a nice balance between descriptive writing, setting the scene, and moving the plot on, or moving the story on.
I did sort of want to treat North Wales a bit like a magical place. Obviously, some of the themes that I explore in there help with the dowsing and things like that. And Wales is quite romantic in that sense of a certain isolation of going to Wales to be yourself. I've got long hair, but almost everyone in Wales has got long hair, haven't they? So I don't. Yeah. Where I used to live, that stood out. Around here, that's normal. Yeah, there's a certain difference to Wales.
That's interesting, because you're bang on.
Yeah, that I wanted to. That's the correct place to set this.
Retired musicians and whatever always find a niche in
they seem to.
That's Wales, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, Robert Plant's not even very far away, is
really?
He? I think he lives in Ludlow, doesn't he?
I don't know.
Never gone far from Wales since that, whichever one of the albums they recorded there. And I felt if I can put you in a slightly magical environment, and I can wherever possible, it sounds stupid, but let the characters take you into the narrative. So that something suddenly that a character thought of doing might become a major thread in the story later on, like Herbert losing the bag that over Loch Ness. That it was a very small incident at the time, and I knew that was the incident.
I'm starting to think at this stage that they're pushing things as far as they can.
Absolutely,
They're pretty close to the edge.
Yeah, and I wanted it to be cautionary like that. I'm a bit cheeky, I think, probably giving it a subtitle, a comedy. But I thought that might, knowing I'm going to take you to some odd places, if I frame it like that for you straight away, you've got heavy context. It's okay, it's just a comedy, we're just playing around, and it has serious moments, but probably all of it was set up just to give me that opportunity to be that playful on the keyboard. And certainly first time out with a novel, I want to make it as fun as I can for me, so that I get it done. So there might be a launch pad to do other things of a very different tone. But character centric. That's why I wanted. There's quite a.
Well, what's also interesting is that they quite enjoy alcohol. They quite enjoy drugs.
Yes, a little bit.
There's an element of the two guys who are involved with females.
Yeah.
So there's all of this, but everything pales into significance when the toy that they have. I'm not trying to say too much here. The toy that they have takes them well beyond all of this.
Yeah.
The other things are all on the periphery. They're addicted to.
Yes, completely. Herbert's just looking for the next thing.
The next energy stream.
Yeah, the next rush, the next whatever, and part of the initial setup with his parents was to set up a certain. Well, what does it matter to Herbert? He's pretty much lost everything anyway, so a slight attitude of he has very little to live for, so it gives him the opportunity to go at maximum speed into all of it, which he does, much to his.
I mean, you may have answered this in part of the other questions, but I put question 5. I like the idea that not one individual character was the centre of the study, which we talked about in Pulp Fiction. Each individual came and went, made significant contributions, and held centre stage for brief periods. Was that intentional? That you're spreading the limelight, that
Yeah, roughly. How it comes out in the end, depending how the scenes need to play out. But roughly, yeah. Who do I want to spend a bit of time with? I might think particularly in the first half of the book where it's a bit quieter, I'll start a chapter that's going to be in the morning. This morning, just going to be around the table. Where do we go from there? I might know I need to do this, this and this with Derek over the course of the next couple of chapters, but how I get there is my fun in the process of doing it. And I actually, and looking back on it now, I worked for years at a concert hall, and having a brother who's an artist, and I've seen a lot of the process, as people call it.
Yeah.
And now being involved in it as well, you realise that in terms of creating it, it's all the process. As you say, you have a book or product of some kind that you can give to someone, but you realise the profound importance of someone's process in getting there, then your process won't be the same as the next person. And I suppose broadly there's parameters that everyone can fit into, but beyond that, and working at the concert hall, I would get requests that sometimes you think, you got to be kidding me, why do you need that, why do you need an extra mic on something we've already put 40 microphones around, why do you need that extra one? And then on the other side of it, you begin to that's why they needed the extra one.
Right. Yeah.
If people ask nice, I was always nice at the concert hall. I'll mic it up. It's all in how you do it. But the process is a funny one, and
I think the interesting, or one of the interesting things, is that you keep it. You've got a limited number of characters. They're all interwoven. They've all known each other for quite a long time. So, like you say, that there is an element of freshness about them, that they don't have to create a veil of illusion. They know who each other is as such. And again, a friend of mine that's a writer says what he finds is that when he's looking at a novel, is he doesn't want too many characters, and he doesn't want too much wordage in terms of speeches from each of the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I thought the balance was very good. And was that something that you were conscious of, or
yes,
just natural?
Yeah, because quite often I'm not particularly. I'm getting faster at typing now. I'm not a very fast typer, but I'll talk the conversation out as I'm typing it out. And of course, in real life, I heighten it slightly for the book. You don't speak in great half paragraphs, half pages, unbroken. People don't speak like that. So I wanted to. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, mine does. I mean, that's not speak. I mean, those are orders, aren't they? That's difficult.
Yeah.
It's a different.
That's the manual.
Yeah. So I wanted to. You sort of keep it natural. How people who know each other very well do speak. And have a little of the enjoyment of shorthand conversations of people who know each other, and very often, if Herbert's speaking to Benjamin's half conversation ahead of where Herbert's going, and getting to have fun with that. And I mean, characters and people are complex enough. I personally, and it might just be an approach that I like. I think characters are complicated enough that you don't necessarily need a labyrinth narrative on top of it. Well, but that, I think, probably quite a lot of that is how I write, and then I go back and I read something like some of the Dashiell Hammett detective fiction, and I'm astonished at how he threads. But then with one of those, the detective narrative almost is the process that he's been through. The characters, I don't mean to exaggerate this, they're slightly superfluous to this labyrinth plot of detective fiction that he's going to take you through in his little towns, and he blows my mind as a writer in dealing with that complexity.
I think the Meifod Claw was easy to access, and you were picked up and you were taken along, rather than thinking there's so many characters. Where does this one come in? That one, I'm 2/3 the way through a book, and then it all falls into place. But
Yeah.
I've come that close to putting the book down
Yeah.
because I'm thinking, you know, I can't work this
Yeah.
out. But eventually it does all fit
Yeah.
together. I quite like the idea. I think it's probably me that's a simpleton, but it picked me up and it took me with it as a, you know.
Yeah,
I could
is
follow
what I was
the thing.
after. Yeah, and there were points where I was conceiving ideas and I thought, well, this is preposterous, you're never going to get away with it. But I quite like the challenge of, well, I'll make get away with it, you know, just and choosing the correct words. I like simple words. I think you can create quite a deep passage of writing with very, very simple words.
I wouldn't call them simple words. No, I think, you know, I think it was eloquently written from that point of view. But I just like the idea that I became part of it very quickly.
That's great. I mean, that's
sort of, and, you know.
Yeah, thank you. That is a big compliment. And the characters and their scenarios and the way they speak, and it's not a complicated narrative to it, but it decides when it wants to go here or go there. So I knew I can't. There's only so many plates, and I want it to be entertaining that you can keep spinning at once. And if I know I'm asking a lot with the technologies in it, with some of the metaphysical things and dowsing that's involved in it, and everything else. I knew I was already doing a lot with theme in there, so you've got to spend time getting used to these guys. I can't. It's a very personal thing that they're doing. So
when you're talking about things like dowsing, I mean that naturally brings us on to the next question, really. And it was, how much research did you have to undertake in terms of geography and certainly science, including botany?
Botany was a bit easier because I do the gardening.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, and again, for me, in terms of the process, I really, actually, I don't like most I like writing about nature. Very often, I don't like nature writing.
Right.
Because I often find they're trying to impress. They're trying. It's like can be like an old Rolling Stones article from 1975 or something, like 10,000 words on yes or something. They're using every inch to try and lift their intellectual. And I find that a lot with nature writing. They like calm down, use the simple approach, because nature's very relatable. And you're only going to make it less relatable, I think, by trying to come across as a thesaurus on top of that.
What about the science, though?
I've been a bit of a UFO nut for quite a long time. So things like
I think it's something that runs in the family.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah.
You're probably from another planet, you and your painter brother.
Yeah.
Because he's into that, isn't he?
A little bit, yeah. But that is, I mean, it is fascinating. I love the UFO stuff because I think we have like there's something going on. A slow preponderance over decades. Some things are flying about out there, but our opportunity to get the context of it wrong and to mess it up, I quite like it. I love the whole UFO scene. There's something about the endeavour of people. And I mean this in the best sense, in the romantic sense of it, hopelessly trying to understand it. It means this. Crop circles mean that. Crop circles aren't real. Oh yes, they are. Yeah. Because I like people and I like characters, you find a lot of characters in there. And UFO conventions and stuff.
Well, I suppose at the time, being set in the 90s, although it was probably a bit early, like you've probably got people like von Daniken and with his theories and Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and stuff like that.
Yeah, and people like that have been a big influence on the work. It's not what I put in the Meifod Claw, probably most particularly in terms of anti-gravity technology, flying saucers, von Daniken, Billy Mayer, all of that weird stuff. What goes into the book isn't necessarily all how I feel about ufology and that whole strange world, but it was what I felt necessary for the book. And I suppose now, if it goes anywhere, people are just going to think I'm a complete UFO lunatic. But
I mean,
it's too good a canvas. It's too good an opportunity for character, and it's a good. It was a good segue to get into other bits of history that, like Wales, are a bit mysterious, a little bit unknowable, even in the modern world. The opportunity to bring up things to do with Nikola Tesla and early electrical experiments, because I think Tesla's some sort of future Jesus Christ type figure from the past. Right. I think his time is yet to come, and we'll realise we'll take steps back to move forward, and that bit of a Tesla freak and the opportunity to.
It is an interesting place, Wales. I mean, I don't know Scotland. I presume that's pretty similar, but I mean, when you fly up from Cardiff to Liverpool and you go over the centre of Wales, you're aware that the roads don't go many places.
Yeah.
You look out the window and you think, this is pretty isolated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I can see one road that goes down there, but there's this vast escarpment of nothing.
Yeah.
You know.
It is, doesn't it?
So if you are flying a flying saucer, that's probably as good as any way to use
to do it. Yeah, out of the way. Yeah, not you know. I mean, I could have gone mad where you set it. I mean, I could have started at the Faroes, but I thought, no, we'll work our way. We'll get there.
So anything back to the research. What your geography research? You talk about the
with geography. Mostly, I just going to go there. That's where I decided. I got a bit of. I've never been to the Faroe Islands, but they look so remarkable. I thought, well, we're going to end up there at some point. And the Frisian Islands, just off the coast there along Holland. I thought I'd read 7 or 8 years ago. I'd read the Riddles of the Sands.
Right.
If you know, it's. I think it's just. It was pre. Was it pre World War One? Fascinating guy, the author. He eventually got put in front of a firing squad. He was involved in running munitions, I think, from England for the Irish in the end. But he wrote this book, this little thriller, as a kind of warning about amassing German naval power, but he played it out in this brilliantly articulate little, like an early spy novel, just set on this series of islands. And when I read that, I thought, do you know, somewhere just off the coast of Holland, from where we are, especially at the time I was living in Suffolk, we see Holland from where we were, and yet it was really mysterious, really other, a bit like how I feel with Wales. It's sort of it's close by, but very, very, very different. So I knew I wanted to go onto the Frisian Islands and have a bit of fun on there. I knew the Faroes would come up. Other than that, I thought I want to mostly avoid places where you might think that you go. Maybe I want to. They're not going to go to Paris. In fact, they're not really city people, so they're not. They're not going to go to New York. They do end up in California for a little while. But then a part of when they go flying, or what they decide to go and visit. They do these things sort of on a whim. So again, it felt better for me to approach that on a whim. And
they often change direction halfway through. They'll go.
Yes, they do.
What about so and so?
Yeah.
All right, I hadn't thought of that.
Or they overshoot where they're trying to get to. Yeah, imagine that though. You're moving at thousands of miles an hour.
But to pick up the thread of the research, why did you set it in the 90s? Was that a particularly
no mobile phones
time to you? Right.
Yeah, a little bit, possibly as well.
In terms of the music and things like that?
Yeah, slightly. I had brothers who were kind of into the rave culture in Wales, and it again, that otherness of Wales seemed to burn quite bright about the 80s and 90s, like that. But otherwise,
I mean, that must have really made your research somewhat difficult, because you've got to look at the vehicles that they're driving, all of that stuff.
It's not.
You've got to go back.
Most of that's okay, but things catch you out.
Do they?
Yeah. less so with this, but just while you got Doing the Brine in Me, which starts Derek Gainsborough's life story. It starts in 1928, so the research, and we take us right up, catch up to modern times. So there's a lot more potential ways, potential traps and things to fall into. One day I was trying to figure out if, and trying to research about when did airlines start getting used in mechanics yards. I think we're in the 50s, and somebody needed an airline. I started typing it, and I was like, oh, hang on, I better make sure. And going around online, very rarely, the internet's usually pretty good at finding stuff, and I couldn't find it out. And in the end, I had to phone my dad up, and he said, yeah, of course they had bloody airlines in the 50s. So odd things like that, but with the Meifod Claw, I sort of felt like I could do what I wanted to do. Really.
Yeah. The
characters in the book do what they want to do effectively as much as they can, don't they?
Well, what's interesting is because they're set in isolation within Wales. It's fairly isolated anyway. There's no reference to politically what's taking place in the world because they're in their vacuum, they're in their bubble. You know? They don't need any of this. There, you know.
Yeah. It was that's a sort of that was a bit of a hope again, that if I can write these three characters in a way that is enjoyable, and if I can make the interplay between them entertaining enough, I don't really need that larger context to put it in.
Yeah.
And The Bride in Me is a little bit like that as well. At one point, Derek, I think they're going through going up to the 1980s, and he suddenly stops and realises, I haven't really been talking about political stuff, and I realised seeing people like Michael Jim, like my dad, and basically people have been doing the same stuff whenever. People have been working hard and they've been going down the pub, and things don't change that much to where you need to. Derek was very working class guy. Well, that's been the same. That hasn't. People have been effectively doing that for hundreds of years. That character hasn't changed, and so I didn't feel as though again I had to tie it into too much of having roughly that things cost the exact amount it should have cost in 1975, say, or he doesn't talk too much about money. You might purchase something, you find out, oh, I was nearly broke after that, I only had very little money left, and
you don't need to be too specific, you mean?
Yeah, which I mean, I've no doubt at certain points these things can trip you up as much as they can be elevate the writing.
Having said earlier that each character comes to the fore for a certain amount of time and then fades away, and then so the central role changes. I'll make another brew in a minute.
That's all right. Yeah, that's okay. I'm enjoying the cup.
It must be freezing by now. But then you have picked up a character in terms of Derek, and you've pitched that into the next novel. Is there any mileage in exploring the characters of the other ones?
Probably. There is some. I have some idea where I would go. At no point have I thought I'd like to write a direct follow-up.
Or just single out Herbert.
Yeah.
Or single out Benjamin.
Yeah.
And give a background of.
And
how
there
arrived at things.
Yes, where Benjamin ends up, there was an idea of what I would do with it and how I would bring Herbert back. Obviously, Herbert is sort of he effectively has to give up everything, but he gets a fairly unlimited amount of this sort of mystical power. And I said, wow, what would you make his conflict in the second? And I thought about bringing him back into his flesh and making it difficult for him to, having in the Meifod Claw, having run as hard as he can to attain the things that he's after. He gets them, and then in a sequel he wouldn't be able to. He'd come back to the flesh with unlimited spiritual mastery, but now he can't fit in with the world at all. But I don't want to try and recapture or go back to or go back to that, at least not.
Well, there may be an incident that takes place in your current novel with Derek that spins off in another direction.
There are, because of course the Brine in Me carries, I mean, not to give too much away, as it overlaps with the Meifod Claw, but Derek continues on after the Meifod Claw, so I have to, in telling his life story, we catch up to the events of the book, and I have to get it then through his heart, through Derek's eyes, describe what goes on, and then what happens afterwards. So I can't help but to do that authentically. I have to go further than I take you in the Meifod Claw. So you find out directly then what happens to Benjamin, a bit more directly what happens to Herbert, and how they begin to resettle themselves and what's going on there.
So technically, when you're writing and you've started the book, you know what the plot is, you know how you're going to tie it in roughly, you've got the sort of chapters headed out, and as you're going through this, you're then thinking about the next one. You know, is it always the next book that you're chasing that's going to be the best piece? I mean, the reason I say this is I've just gotten more and more into ceramics, and there's a guy that's got an exhibition, or had an exhibition, in Ruthin Craft Centre. Very famous potter, and he's got like 50 years work of pots, which are all quite stunning. And he said, you know, most of the work within the show came out of the last 4 firings. He's a guy that's in his 70s.
Yeah.
He said, because you're always constantly firing because of that gem that just might come out. And then you do another one and 2 gems come out.
Yeah.
And so, is it pretty much the same with...
I think it probably... Yeah, it's quite... I mean, they're quite... It's quite a long process, so there's definitely amount of... because I hand wrote it, and it was a first go, and a limited time to spend on it. It took about 2.5 years to hand write the Meifod Claw. And then the final book comes in about 135,000 words. I should think I hand wrote about 150 or 60,000 words. So that comes down a bit. So there is, once you've decided in your heart, right, this is what I'm going to work on, it's got to be of interest to you, I think. At least initially, whereas now I think, as I was saying before, is how do you deploy a boring scene? What can you find in a boring scene and deploy it? So I want to run a little bit in the future at some things that might not initially jump out at me as an opportunity to do something with them. I know what the next novel is going to be. Right. Yeah.
And that's grown out of the process that you've working your way through.
Yeah, that actually grew out directly of a friend of mine who looks after hedgehogs. And that's, and that started from there with a slow drip. Oh, what would I? And that's going to be my first sort of full-blown fantasy novel. So there's a whole world to build there. I name things, and then I have to. I had the Meifod Claw as a name for years before, and then as I was approaching to write The Brine in Me, I knew what I was going to do, but I like to find the title, and then that sort of gives me the tone that I'm after. And I found The Brine in Me, and I thought, I'm really happy with that. That's what I want to run with. And then it happened again in the 3rd book. That has a title that I'm not giving away.
Couple of final questions. Did you write it in a linear fashion from start to finish, or was it constructed in sections and woven together later? Were the more descriptive passages written in isolation, without the story getting in the way, something that I touched on earlier, and strategically introduced at a later stage? Meaning, if I'm writing about, I don't know, a walk that I've done that day, and I'm describing about the height of the grass on the right hand side, the sound of the barge that may be going past them, with this, that and the other, then I can write pages and pages of this. It's far too much to put in as an introduction to a paragraph or a chapter. But I might think, well, I'll use these 3 lines, or I'll use that, and I'll put that on one side in a file, and then I'll take that out and I'll use that when that's... Is that the way that it works? Or?
I think there's little... It's a good question, by the way. When I'd got the questions and I was going through them, and I was doing some drafting, and and I got to that one, and I really jumped back a bit because I thought my immediate I just write it start to finish. But then as you carry on with your question, like, you almost unravelled it. That's not what I do, but you definitely unravelled some of the process. I would write certain bits in isolation, where particularly, say, with moments where Herbert's dousing and closes his eyes and we're going into a very deep internal world, where I would write, if I reach that point, I'll put the pen down, I'm going to write that at night when the world's come in, and I wouldn't so much do it and then save it for later, but I would wait a day, 2 days for the correct circumstance. Right, now's the right time to get the sort of tone that I'm after there, and but that would be a preliminary draft. Once it's going back and forth with the editor, there becomes a little bit more of, okay, I'll isolate that out there, we'll keep those, we'll get rid of that, and a bit of shifting. And initially it's a bit more of that alchemical, don't stir it too fast, be gentle, and then once you got that into shape, you can begin to kick it around a bit more then and get involved with it. So some element of that, but that's the most detailed question someone's asked me about the process yet, actually. And when I read it, you almost...
But did it...
It struck very, very deeply.
But did it clarify your thinking? I haven't really thought of it like this. Perhaps that's the way...
It put me on a process of it. Yeah. And because of how I approach it, a lot of the time I don't want to think about why have I chose that. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with it, and I don't want to get in the way. So very often I don't come back and be a bit introspective with why I might have done things. And a question like that kicks that process off and makes you think about what you're doing. But I still haven't got a clear answer.
Well, I was just thinking about when you're chilling out and you had a cup of tea, or you might have had a beer or so, and you're placed in a situation like this where I might be looking at the way that the skylight frames the clouds, not on a day like this, or the way that the autumn leaves leave a print on the surface or whatever, or a reflection within the clock face or whatever it might be. And I might write a load of this that's got nothing to do with where I'm at in terms of the novel. Yeah. But I think it's quite interesting. I'll try and work this in at some point.
Yeah, that's going to be useful to me later on. No.
That's interesting, though, because that's the way that's the only way that I would have a way of working.
No, I mean at the moment I can't, because I try and it's whatever it needs to make it to I haven't encountered that yet.
But I think that gives you a disciplined edge, in as much as I end up with loads of bits that's all over the place, and I think, how the hell am I going to weave these together? Yeah. And that's going to take so much effort. I'll do a painting. I'll do something different. Yeah. A bit of displacement activity. Whereas if you're holding it in, it's almost like catching a fish, isn't it? It's running off a bit, but then you reel it back, and you let it go again. And eventually
it is like that. Yeah. It feels overly simple because I like being at the position of doing creative writing. I just get comfy with that when I'm doing it, and I just let that just sort of take me, really. There's sure you know better than me with the painting. You're very keen on that moment. Having not in my studies university, I'd always take the chance where I could have branched onto English courses. I'd always take those, but I wasn't. I haven't particularly come through a heavy English literature background, which has some disadvantages initially. But then I think having a sort of slightly self-taught attitude can have advantages as well. And I think probably a lot of my interest with tone, which is the overarching thing for me, is a tone. I perhaps think of, as I'm writing these things, I think of them a little bit as like an album. and each chapter is a bit like a single, or say of the three acts, the first act.
But more of a concept album in terms of Sergeant Pepper or Dark Side of the Moon or whatever. That's, you know.
I see. Actually, as I'm saying it, Solid Air's coming into my mind, which is ticks all of the tone things that I like. And within that, you can go to different places. Just to carry that on, within Solid Air, there's a couple of funk songs in there. There's folk songs, but it's all cohesive, and that's what I wanted. That sense of start to finish that the boys didn't overly have to plan, but they didn't overly plan, and they ran on this crazy whim for a few years. And to get that, I was going to have to write it running on that sort of whim. And I guess there's a certain element, I don't know if you have it with the art, there's a certain element of make-believe. How often do you think about the strokes that you're making before you make them?
You try not to do any of that, really. You just try to be as free and as spontaneous as
That's
you
exactly,
possibly can. All of the laws and the rules that you've learned, you try to put in a box at the side of your bed and not, and leave them there. Yeah. If you can, and you only sort of take things out of the box in theory when it's relevant. Yeah. You just do it. Yeah. And what's really refreshing at certain times is when you look at something a week or so later or a couple of days later, and you think, did I do that? That looks really quite strange for me. Because obviously the process has taken you beyond your comfort zone and somewhere else.
And at the time of doing it, you're so involved in doing it, you don't even know, somehow you don't notice what you're doing. No. And you come back the next day and...
Well, you notice as you're getting older that you've been stood in the same position without moving for 4 hours. So when you do start to move, you're like...
Right, I'm a terrible pacer with the writing. So I have an up-high desk, so I don't have to sit down with it. I can just
wander around
the room. Yeah. With music on very loud sometimes. Now slowly, as people have gotten used to the writing... friends and stuff, or friends of Anna's who come round for the first time, and they'll hear Chris Robinson Brotherhood playing out quite loud, quite funky, and then people say, well, what's John doing down there? Oh, he's working down there. He's writing. You can't be writing, music's pounding, but somehow for me in that atmosphere,
that's interesting.
It works up, and then
it gets you in the zone.
Yeah, and then it almost gets pushed aside, the music, and you don't, like you say, you don't realise, I've been standing still for 4 hours. I don't realise, say, half an album has passed, and I haven't tuned into any of it.
Showing my age, when it used to be records, you'd put a record on when you started working, and the only thing that would bring you back to sort of the world that you were in was a click, and you think, oh, it's turned itself off.
Yeah, Yeah, I get a bit of that.
25 minutes had gone by the side of an album, or however long they used to be, which was weird. I mean, the final question I was going to ask, which I thought was, where can I get some of that 9.4 barley wine?
Where can you get it? Which one was that? Was that Raven's Ranker?
Can't remember, but there was a real delight when. Yeah. Wow, there's a 9.4. I'm thinking, how they're drinking rum during the day. They're drinking, there's various other concoctions. How many pints of 9.4 can you? But they don't.
Probably not many.
Well, but I mean, they just sail on. They just.
I wanted that. Derek's quite vivacious, and the guys are in their 20s, so they can keep doing it. And as we, when I first came out there, and you were talking about the feeling of the book of, they're never going to be able to hold this together. And I wanted that I wanted that tension. So I was aware all the time, all the extremes that they go to in personal and pleasure pursuit, and I was very aware that they will really run into the red line of what they could do, but they're at a certain age where you can get away with that for a little while.
It reminded me very much of the Tony Wilson story where what's the band? Oh God, Factory Records The Mondays go to Barbados. He sends them to Barbados, and it's drugs free in theory, without realising that it's the crack cocaine capital of the world at that particular time. And this woman phones them up from the studio and says, "You've sent me some bands in the past that skated pretty close to the edge. These don't know where the edge is."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Like, they got off the plane and vanished. I haven't seen them for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah, that's the
it's that
attitude.
sort of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
wackiness.
Yeah.
You know.
Which is not me.
No, I understand.
I'm also aware when you put a book like the Meifod Claw out, I'm also aware, especially as it's a debut novel, in a certain sense, you're putting out your stall, and people, if this is all they've got to go on of you, if they don't know you, how much of that is John? And I slightly don't want to spoil it by going, it's just stuff that I made up. I mean,
I don't think you'd have been in a position to write had you been one of the characters.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because people have asked, it's like, wow, it's crazy. What's your past been like? And I've sort of said, well, would you write a crime that? Would you say to a crime novelist, how many people have you murdered? You don't need to. The part of the thing of being the writer is, well, make believe, and have fun with it.
Yeah.
But the beer, I can actually. The brewery that I really like, that I thought they actually do a stronger stout than that. I think
Really?
10-11%
Wow.
stout. Green Jack's Brewery in Lowestoft, a most easterly brewery.
Well, you'd only need a pint of that.
You do, yeah. I've taken, but you need half a pint of that. Yeah, it's spoon standing stuff. But I wanted to have fun with the beers in it, and the beer names and things. Again, it's all of that make-believe, particularly of male relationships, male mythology of what blokes do if you left them together. If they had a bit of money, then they probably would go a little bit, they might not do what these guys did, but they'd probably go a bit mad in another direction as well. And I quite like male mythology like that, not in terms of, I don't mean like Greek myth and the ideal of male and larger theological or deeper beliefs, but how men act, particularly the folly of men, the almost you were talking about the potter, the want for the next thing. It's kind of, what is the next thing? What's the next hobby that I can get into? What's the next folly that I can? And men quite often seem to be given half the chance would run with that, whatever their particular thing is. With my uncle, it was boats, and life was about boats and
painting, writing.
Yeah, and so I've had a lot of fun with that. In fact, I've had 2 books that are very heavy on male mythology. So the third novel is going to be more female centric. See where we go with that.